should have gone to bed, but instead I was doom scrolling on my phone, and this thing came up with this person talking about discipline is all about your future self. You're just giving your future self something. Tom ever sat in a graphic design studio and was like, this is interesting, didn't know this existed. Key moments where you see people you're working for fail to take opportunities. So ad agencies are like, well, that branding shtick looks pretty easy, I'll go and have a go at that. Or digital agencies are like, hang on a minute, we're getting given all these brand guidelines and then we're making websites that wouldn't necessarily be how we want them to look like. Let's go upstream and do the brand as well, then we can make the websites we want to make. You know, there's a different reason, and it's about offense, defense, where
James Greenfield, off of Koto. I'm starting a new way of doing these things, and that is to focus around your LinkedIn profile.
Right, fair enough.
So I'm on your LinkedIn profile. Okay, I can see this person's been at Design Studio, famed for doing the Airbnb rebrand, becoming Brian Chesky's favorite human being in the world. I made that part up, but I'm sure it's not too far from the truth. Then goes and starts their own studio, Koto.
Yeah.
Again, famed for doing something kind of crazy, rebranding Fiverr, the app where you can go on and get a logo for £5. Which
not anymore, but yeah.
Okay, fine. Brought some controversy to the world, right? Then I just see this meteoric growth. You go from 3 of you, Joey, Caroline, yourself, to then having an agency of 110 people in LA, Australia, New York, London. I'm not going to carry on because there's probably more places I've forgotten about. 110 people working with massive brands, Google, Fiverr. I don't know why Fiverr keeps coming up in my head, but there it is. And I won't list all of your clients. But before I get in and understand where that came from and who you were before all that stuff, what do I not see when I look at your LinkedIn profile?
You're going to review my LinkedIn profile and give me some tips on how to sort it out. I'm sure.
Why does it not say open to work?
Yeah. Why have I not verified my identity yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is it like? I don't know. It probably misses some story, I think. I think, a company doesn't start the day you start it. A company starts, as a teenager, in your mind, your aspiration. There's kind of a couple of moments in my life that are kind of key for me that kind of felt like my beginning of my journey to entrepreneurship kind of, worked. The first time I ever sat in a graphic design studio and was like, this is interesting, didn't know this existed. Key moments where you see people you're working for fail to take opportunities, and how in that situation put in the driving seat, you would go like, well, we definitely need to do that because that's what either the client's asking for or that's the potential. Moments where you realise that you need a team more than yourself, and that's a hard thing for some entrepreneurs to get their head around because we live in this world where we kind of put these kind of landmark single monuments up to people and go like, Johnny Ive did design the whole iPhone. No, he didn't. That's thousands of people did that. So I think that's probably what's missing from a LinkedIn profile. The series of moments that bring you to that day that you kind of go like, oh, I'm just going to go and resign and I haven't got a job. It's like I was talking to someone the other day. I was saying like, it's when you take a one-way flight somewhere. It's such an alien thing to us when you're moving to a new country. We're so used to having the return ticket in our pocket, and that was the metaphor I felt like, which was, next 25th of the month, there's no salary and that savings account has only got that much in, and there isn't any more money anywhere else that you're getting short of a bank loan, and you're not very bank loanable at the moment, And so I think that's what LinkedIn doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you those moments that lead you to that confidence to then go like, I have to build momentum here. I have to build something.
Confidence. Where does that come from? Because I when I sit with you in our Good CEOs meetings, I feel there's this element of James Greenfield that's like the voice of reason. Everyone will sort of be like nattering away and you'll be like, duh, and you'll say one thing and it will summarize the whole 25 minutes of conversation leading up to that moment. Can you remember where or who it was that made you feel like you should be confident, had talent, and should double down on that?
So I think if I kind of like go back a level on that, I come from a family of talkers, and like growing up, everyone was just talking all the time, solidly, and so therefore to get heard as my first nuclear family, which before my parents got divorced, there was 4 of us. I was the quietest person in that group of 4 probably. And so therefore, when I meet other people and tell them that I was the quiet, they're kind of like, okay, that's weird. You're probably the chattiest, noisiest person we've ever met. So the idea of you being the quietest at something kind of gives them the sense of that. And so I think early on, this ability to have to say something of impact to get noticed. And then I went to a grammar school, which was a boys' grammar school, which was incredibly competitive, and everyone was constantly trying to trip each other up, physically and metaphorically. And so therefore you have to then operate. And I went there in the 90s, in a time where we were still a bit in the old world, and so therefore, we were told openly, like, you're the top 10% of the population, you're going to go on to do great things, it's your journey to like succeed and stuff, in classrooms which were not very disruptive. And so all of that, and then each thing in life, you get kicked into the next place. And early in my career, I realized that I was in this weird situation where, though I was a designer, I didn't fear the client or talking to the client or explaining ourselves to the client. And not everybody, but a lot of people I work with, they showed themselves in the four walls of the studio by doing amazing creative and, bringing some kind of idea to the table. And the competition in their mind was with their colleagues or with other studios or whatever. And for me, I felt that I was always like, well, ultimately that person can kill all of the last 2 weeks of work unless we actually engage them in what we're trying to achieve. And so therefore, and people were like, fine, go on then. And so 25-year-old presenting, being able to like engage people. I remember I turned up at one studio and they were like, oh God, you're so good with the clients, you just go and do more of that. And it's like, well, it's not really my job, but fine. If it leads to us like getting better work through and doing more things, I'll kind of pick the mantle up. And I think for me, I think a lot of creatives are quite introverted naturally because they've expressed themselves creatively. That's a broad generalization, but there is something out there. And so I think that what that means is that people that run creative businesses of scale are quite often not creatives.
Why is, because you're CEO now, right?
Yeah.
And I can count, I don't even know if I can count on one hand, from creative director to then CEO that I would know in my sort of immediate circle. It doesn't happen.
No.
So, but then at the same time, you would have had to have made a choice as a designer, design director, creative director to be the person that goes, I'm going to be really, really good at the craft, so I'm respected in this room of creatives, but I'm also going to be really, really good at the client stuff to make sure that this doesn't get, taken away. How did you do both? What would and if you were speaking to a design director that's looking up to you and going, I want to be a CEO one day, what do you have to do differently to the 95% of designers?
You can't be good at everything. It's impossible. The complete person doesn't exist. There is no one in this world who is brilliant at all the things. And so therefore, you have to acknowledge in a team environment, these are my weaknesses. I need someone else to do that. And so therefore, from my point of view, as I scaled Koto, I was like, well, you do that, and like understand the kind of my own personal limitations to allow me to then grow into the thing that I knew I needed to become. So I think there is a piece which is some people miss paths in their careers where they don't see the opportunity open up and acknowledge the uncomfortableness and turn left into something because they're worried about losing everything they've got. And actually what you should be doing is going, well, I've got that already. No one's really ever going to take it away from me. The mindset of like, when that goes to Cannes, DNAD or whatever, I'm not someone that's really ever entered awards, but let's use that as like a medium. They're so worried that their name's on that credits list. Why? Why does your name need to be on that credit list? You don't need to own that anymore. You've done that. You've got that. Like, look at the new frontier over there. That's the place you should be aiming for. When we started Koto, someone I don't really know at all, I know of, very well regarded, who's chief creative officer of another business, sent me a message and it said, it's amazing to see a creative director be the CEO for once. And he was like, we're just never trusted. And he had this sense that we were never trusted to get that. And I can kind of see where that comes from, because I think people think about things through the lens of finance or ops or whatever. And actually, unless you make space for creativity, then you're never going to do that. And however great a person's background is in client service or ops or CFO or whatever, the product you're selling at the end of the day, for most agencies, is creativity. And so for me, it makes a lot of sense for the person at the top to be the figurehead, because they understand the product intrinsically that you're selling. In the same way that, if I'm an engineering company, it's probably going to be an engineer at the top. Or if I'm involved in some kind of element of technology, that person's probably got a computer science degree or something. Yeah. It's just our industry's a bit weird.
It is weird. I heard another company that they do a thing now where before the CFO can make a decision, before whoever moves forward, they have to ask somebody in the creative department if they think it's a good choice. because a lot of these holding companies go, right, okay, numbers, spreadsheets, boom, we'll make this cool. They have to run it by a designer or a seat creator or whatever, which I quite like. Why is such a right brain, I always forget right or left brain, dominated industry so preferable or leaning towards the right side, the logical side versus the creative side? Could there be a creative way to approach the financial model that you just put ahead of your company? It's weird how we don't think like that more. I want to go back just to the birth of you and kind of really to connect to anyone that's listening who could be thinking of doing their own thing. What had to happen? So like you're in an amazing branding agency, in a design studio was the agency you were at before, right? You've just done the Airbnb rebrand, which again could be work of the decade, right? That sort of identifies the best thing that happened with the best company at that time. What happened to you to make you go, I want to do my own thing differently and risk everything and start a business?
Well, in that circumstance, I think if I apply it to anybody, I think you could just ask yourself, well, how much higher am I going to go? Like, what's my next mountain? Because for me at that moment in time, I was happy with the work. We had a great client relationship. We'd built out something which 10 years on still stands the test of time, which I was confident in that outcome that we would do that, and that's what we'd done. What's the challenge that lies beyond this? Am I going to see the same amount of growth that I've been through individually as a person and given to the team collectively in working in that circumstance where I'm just another brief, another thing? Probably not. And so for me as an ambitious individual, that's what I had to achieve. Second thing, my dad was dying from cancer and I wanted him to know that I'd achieved my dream of starting my own business before he went. So,
wow, okay. What was different about this? So you're thinking, okay, I want to start Koto branding agency, da 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 da. Did you have in your head the things that you didn't want to do and did want to do?
I wanted to close a gap was the number one thing, which was I felt like there was this divide that existed in the business, in the industry, I should say, which is big branding projects went to big companies where there was this perception of, as I'd heard told to me many times before, grey hairs were needed. So, like kind of the war scars to understand that, it wasn't about creative ability necessarily. It was about like, well, you've got to get it past the board or, these kind of very pragmatic things that matter, don't get me wrong, but that seemed like a perception. Or if it was like, cultural or cool or whatever, it had to go to a smaller agency of a certain size or scale who would love and sweat it and overspend on it and make it this kind of beautiful object. And my sense was craft is vitally important, whatever we do. And I felt like the big holding groups weren't necessarily delivering that craft because, as you've kind of alluded to already, that economically they're not set up to, spend a lot of time in strategy because, let's be honest, you can make money in strategy and creative's harder to make money out of. So they weren't sweating the details, and then the smaller companies were just never getting that option. And so I wanted to kind of be slap bang in the middle where I felt like, the biggest branding briefs of the year, we could put our hat in the ring to get there. But at the same time, we were going to see it through with a small team mentality to make sure that the work afterwards was great. Because in my career, I'd done a few cleanup jobs, and it was always this kind of same perception of like, well, big agencies don't care, chuck and run, on to the next brief. All these kind of things you hear, like the same thing you would get which was in a new business environment. It'd be like, you're not the new business team. You're not going to bait and switches, are you? Are you going to definitely run the project? These things you hear again and again. And so I had a list of these things that I felt that Koto could be better at because I knew through my own experience where clients felt they were underserved.
And what is underserved? Like, I'm not a brand.
Satisfaction.
Yeah.
A feeling of like what was promised at the beginning is delivered at the end. The fact that, someone like a CMO is probably the person that's most in danger at any organization because sales start to dip, marketing's not working, fire the marketer, start again.
Like a football manager.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like that.
So underserved. How okay. I want to know one branding project. Tell me about a branding project that's come in and start to finish, that is like, it's gone brilliantly. Because we said before, how do you measure the success of a branding project, right? Do you say the perception's gone up, or is it more claps in the all hands in the morning? Tell me a story about a time where maybe even unexpectedly a rebrand has led to a CMO or a brand being disproportionately in a better place than they were before they met with you.
It's an interesting one in terms of like everybody has different values.
Yeah.
So some people want to be metric. So if I look at something like Deezer, which we did recently, that's seen dormant accounts get reawoken at a number that's unexpected and above what they would normally expect. And it's because I believe, reinvented the perception of the brand and placed it side by side with their competition. And because what ultimately the challenge they had was their brand marketing and product experience were out of sync with each other. Like if you saw an advert for it and then you picked up the product, it wasn't the same thing. And so therefore there's a kind of like a confidence or a trust from a user point of view about being able to understand that actually this gives me what I want it to give me.
So more downloads, suddenly more useful on the app. Okay.
Versus someone, we recently rebranded a Barcelona-based company called Preply, and the CEO, when I went for lunch with him afterwards, said to me, like, the most unexpected thing that's happened in this whole thing is my team are happier and recruitment came 5 times easier. And
People want to join this business now because they've seen the rebrand.
And he didn't realise quite how much brand and product was making people go like, I don't really want to work on that because it kind of sits below the perception of what it's actually like. And he's like, there's an energy in the place. And he goes, I just didn't expect it in any way, shape or form. And so each person you talk to has a different outcome for how they, expect it. The one that we get all the time is that we'll get hired by someone who's at a level like maybe they're a head of brand or a head of marketing or a CMO or something, and then you'll meet the skeptical founder, CEO, who, is a bit like, well, maybe they're being a bit critical of me. I've built this business that's worth, X million, X 100 million in many cases, and they're telling me that this sucks, that sucks, and this sucks. And you have to go like, yes, and they're like, what? And they're kind of offended by it. Yeah. So you talked about Fiverr earlier. The CEO of Fiverr and I, Mika, had a very lively conversation in the middle of the product, which was mid-COVID. So we're on Zoom. It's a big Zoom. There's a lot of people in this Zoom, and him and I are having a very heated discussion because I'd said, well, you didn't really have a brand before, did you? And he took great kind of, I'd say almost offense at it. And then I had to like lay my case out. And afterwards he said to me, that was a really good conversation. I was glad we had that because we managed to, have that kind of moment where we really said what we meant about it from each other's sides. And so it really depends upon the mind state, the experience, and what the person wants out the back of it. One of the things I always say to our clients is, we're not going to be able to make you better than you are. So many people go like, falling figures, sales figures, or reputation challenge, or whatever. Just make the brand loads better, and it's like, yeah, that's great. But then someone uses your product and it sucks. And that's almost worse than having a terrible brand, I think, because you're really selling them a false impression.
What do you think of that? I saw somewhere that the top 10, most valuable companies in the world don't advertise or don't the Elon Musk X rebrand or whatever. What do you say to people that are that deny the value of brand?
Brand deniers are everywhere, left and centre. Like, the product is not enough, And Tesla, let's use, as you've mentioned, Elon, is finding itself in its sales figures. You can see that they haven't thought about the whole life cycle of that product. So you sell it in an interesting way. It does loads of interesting stuff. It's a great product experience for some people. Some people don't like it. Some people find it a bit plasticky and a bit rubbish inside. But if it goes wrong, particularly in the UK, I've heard this from so many people, they've got no aftercare. And you're taking people from BMW, Mercedes, wherever else, where they've done very well out of aftercare very much, thank you very much, because they've realised there's a lot of money in aftercare. You take your BMW for a service, it suddenly needs a new pollen filter, it needs all this stuff, you're walking out 700 quid worse off. But the person feels like they got something for it because they went to that garage on the industrial estate. Your Tesla goes wrong, they've got some digital-only experience. It's not an iPhone. It is not an iPhone. It's doing a lot more than an iPhone can be. And so therefore, you've got to understand the full life cycle. And so the brand denier will only ever think about one part of the journey rather than thinking about the whole, you can be a great company that can come out today, but if you don't think about the full life cycle journey, you look at Peloton, started getting so excited about this idea that gyms were dead. Absolute fallacy, and anyone could have told you it was a fallacy at the time. And so therefore, the denial of the full existence of where this thing needed to go is normally partly connected to brand, because brand building is hard and it takes time.
And that's, I guess, your job right there is to hold up a mirror and go, right, I know you think this is the gyms are dead or whatever. Like, I guess there must be an art to that, because you're speaking to an optimistically naive, or whatever you want to call it, founder who does need an element of the gym is dead, Peloton's the thing forever, versus the pessimistic, by the way, that's not actually real. You do know that you can't be saying that and you should be changing your strategy. How do you do that, particularly with a company that's worth, $200 million?
You can't always. Can you put one classic example? So in the middle of the pandemic, we were working with a company called Hopin, which was the most the most valuable, fastest, like VC-backed company ever, and everyone was telling me how amazing it was.
It was like Zoom, but a 3D experience.
Yeah,
right?
and basically it was going to replace in real life events. And I had a conversation with the founder, and he was like, "Events are dead. Everyone's going to just do this instead." And then I spoke at a conference on Hopin, and like the numbers there in the corner, there's like 6,900 people listening to me, but I'm in my loft. I can't see anyone. All I can see is my slides, and I'm like, there's no human response. Like anyone that's ever stood on stage and talked, if you're any good at it, you're looking at what people are doing. You're changing your meta. You're like amping the volume up, or you're bringing it down, or you're adding jokes in, or you've realised that this isn't a jokey thing because the speaker before told a story about,
death,
suicide or something. And so therefore you just can't do that. And I've got VCs telling me that this is the best thing since sliced bread. Everyone that works there's buying the Kool-Aid.
Wow.
And I'm saying to him, look, I just don't believe that in-person events are dead. And he's like, no one likes business travel. And I'm like, it's not true. People like business travel because they get away from their families.
Yeah.
It's a horrible fact, but some people want some peace and quiet in their life, and that is a thing that's well acknowledged by many surveys and stuff. And so, but they just didn't want to know it in that moment in time. And so therefore that was a project where the destination that they thought the brand was going on was completely at odds with their consultancy.
Wow. So you didn't take that job?
We did the job.
Okay.
Never got launched.
Okay. I want to focus on Koto for a moment. I know you've probably been asked a million questions about Koto and its growth. 110 people worldwide. Why did it grow like it did, do you think? In a market, because the world didn't need another branding studio, right? You've got a ton of brilliant branding studios out there. What was it that Koto did or launched or said or did that meant it could grow to host 100 people globally?
Few factors. First factor is, as much as I believe in it, we're not just focused on the product we sell. Like so many agencies rightly spend a lot of effort on the creative or whatever they're making, etc., and that becomes outsized in how the place is run. For the senior leadership team at Koto, very clear in the KPIs that they all respond to that we're a people first business, so we have to be first responsible for people, and then product is a secondary concern for us internally, not for our clients. And so therefore I think that plays into our client interaction or our talent experience, or however you look at it, whichever way it comes into it, is that you have collectives of, we get it wrong, like everyone does, and we've got work to do, but because we're in the pursuit of excellence in that arena, that then plays out to a greater experience. It's like, if you go to an Apple store, some people love them, some people hate them, but you can't say that they haven't sweated the details on that thing. You take your iPhone in, there's no tills, there's some person, normally a guy, in a t-shirt, hands a phone. If you're really technologically illiterate, it might be really frustrating, but the whole thing is done really well because they've delivered excellence. Now, if I go into like a mobile phone store or whatever, I'm getting a very crap version of that almost across the board everywhere. It's no different in our own industry. You've got to deliver that people experience, whether you're inside the four walls or outside the four walls, because that is essentially the difference. That's your differentiating factor.
So how does that look then? If I was, a design director at Koto right now versus I just joined from another branding agency or whatever, what are you hoping, or what is their goal for them to be turning around to you and saying after 3 years of working for you, thanks so much, I've really found that has happened?
No, that's a journey. I think with kind of a journey we're on at the moment, so I feel like we've got a lot of work to do on that front, which is hopefully every company feels like it's got work to do. But for me, I think it's like we've made environments where they can work. We've brought people together in offices. We haven't got them as isolated pods sat at home. Yeah. And so therefore we know that they are like connected with their co-workers. We've got a very clear organogram so people understand who they're in charge of, how it works. We've got twice yearly reviews. We've got a lot of staff survey work. We've got a lot of feedback work. We've got an AI strategy. We've got sales training, which we're in the process of doing for certain tiers. We've got strong training programs across like purposeful presenting and mental health provision and all that kind of stuff. We're doing a lot of stuff that's non-product focused. We're hiring people, and when we hire them in, we go, do you want to do more work on technical skills? Do you want to do more work on whatever aspect? And so therefore we're not just thinking about the fact that next Friday we've got a presentation in Croatia to the board of Project X, which is because it is a very big, noisy thing. Most agencies get drowned in this idea of, 2 weeks' time we've got that big pitch, 4 weeks' time we've got that, that other big pitch. Just focus purely on that and the business of the day and forget about all other things. And my job, particularly within Koto, is to get my head away from the business of the day so we can be more strategic about those other things that we're thinking about.
I really went the other way. And it's funny hearing you speak about it this way around, because when I first launched Unknown, I was trying to do this thing which was anti all other recruitment companies. I got everyone therapist, everyone got a Soho House membership, even though recruiters are banned from that. And I went really far to make sure that they, weren't like your recruiters, typical kind of estate agency sort of style people. And then, it worked for the first 5 or 6 people, but then when you bring in the next, load of people, you're asking them to rip up a rule book they've never read before. And so the conditions that they've walked in are just the conditions. That's normal. And then you want them to work as hard as the other guys who have come from PTSD, fucking dial and smile kind of agencies. And so I'm relying on this kind of epigenetic PTSD to come through their managers to go, you don't know how good you've got it. And it's a struggle because we have these 20-something-year-old people who are going, I don't care. This is just the world now. And I'm not going to work as hard as you want me to. They don't say this per se, but it can happen, and it has happened before. So how do you find that? Because, I'm asking the people first strategy. It feels it's noble, but there's a commercial reason behind that, right? Let's go people first. Why are you so?
Not actually a commercial reason behind it.
What's the reason?
I want to sit in a studio all day where we have a good time, and I'm spending 9 hours a day sat in a room with other people. If there's disharmony or stuff's not working, obviously there's always moments. You've got lots of groups of people together, then it's crap for everyone else, but it's ultimately crap for me.
Yeah.
So therefore I'm like, and we travel a lot and fly all the time, and a lot of our clients are global, and so you're spending a lot of time in hire cars, trains, planes,
with these people,
hotels with people. If we haven't got a people first strategy where we're not profiling the people that come through the door, I don't want to spend 3 hours on a plane and then an hour and a half sat in a bad restaurant under a hotel, which, let's be honest, is quite often the only thing left open, if I'm not going to enjoy talking to these people about like what they're doing and how we're going to get this project done and all that kind of stuff. So it's not actually a commercial imperative. It's about the fact that I wouldn't wish a crap experience on other people, because it's not about bums on seats. It's about, many times we've had situations where we're like 3 or 4 people short. I'm not just going to throw anyone into those 3 or 4 people, because it would just be disruptive.
How do you answer that question? People say, what are you building? Or because it feels like you've built a thing maybe bigger than you thought you were going to build originally.
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
Because I can just about answer that question now. We're a tenth of the size of you guys, and I don't want to get much bigger than 20 people.
No one ever does it because it feels comfortable.
Yeah, it's nice, right? Yeah. And I can imagine, $1 million EBIT, and that's like a nice little size to stay around. I'm sure once we reach that point, I'm going to have the same situation that you probably had about 15 times over. But how do you answer that question when somebody turns around to you now and says, James, what are we building? Or if someone did turn around to you and say, what is Koto going to be like in 3 years' time? Can you answer that clearly, or do you feel like, actually, I'm not sure?
No one can predict the future. I think you can look at it in any different possible lens. So, an author can be writing a book today, but they can't sit there and go, the next 10 books I'm going to write are going to be great, because they can only do what today exists. A sports team can be on a great run, 10 matches unbeaten, and they can go like, in 3 seasons, we're going to do this. You don't know. And our business is no different from that. It's like Apple can go like, oh, we're going to unbundle, we're going to do products, we're going to do services. And it's well acknowledged at the moment. There's a car that was cancelled, and they're definitely out there trying whatever the next thing is, but they haven't got a surety of it. When the iPad launched, people mocked it. The name was terrible. It was going to be a failure. It's been a brilliant thing that's sat in between, and people have invented new things around it. But they didn't know that on day one. They just had Steve Jobs being maniacally obsessed with it for many years before. And so if you ask me what Kota's about, in a service economy, which is where we sit, it's really important to think about, is you can only really ever look 6 months ahead at like what the future of service looks like. I can't sit here and tell you what the future of restaurants are going to be like, but I can tell you how to make a great restaurant experience and what you should prioritize and what you should be thinking about, and the economic conditions with which we exist, which affect the capability of you to deliver that. And so what does Koto look like? I don't live in the future too much, because if you live in the future too much, you're just going to get your eye off what we're trying to achieve in the near term. And also, the fact of the matter is that most agencies are only ever really looking 6, maybe 12 months of income ahead, because their clients also don't know what they're doing. So the last thing they can do is tell their service provider that actually in Q4 26 we're going to be planning this, because most big companies, when you look inside them, are chaos, pure chaos. And our job is to be the sponge for that chaos and to help them just have a moment away from that in some kind of way.
Fair enough. 12 months from now, then, let's go. That's a fair distance ahead.
I'll have a crack.
Okay. All the good things happen. Everything you've planned, the people first thing is kicking off really, really well. We're 90% there. What is different about Koto in what's the day today?
I think we deliver more
15th of May.
Of the experience for people. So we're kind of this end of this year will be 10 years in existence, and I think we're well established for branding. We've got great branding credentials, but we've been doing like digital experiences for people for quite a while now. I don't think the people in the world necessarily know about that. I don't think we're necessarily great at communicating it to people about it. I don't think we've necessarily done a good enough story about acknowledging that. The second thing is, for whatever reason, I think people perceive us to be a very predominantly visual company, whereas in fact we're very well regarded for our strategy work. So we recently launched a strategy newsletter to kind of show what happens inside behind the closed doors. More acknowledged as a collaborative partner rather than just like a service provider. That's what I'd like to try and achieve a bit more.
What does that mean?
A lot of people that hire us are creatives themselves.
Right.
We don't want them to feel like we're taking away from their capability to drive the change in their business. What we're doing is we're just creating a bit of a superpower so that they can bring in people who've got very good broad experience. If you hire someone senior at Koto, they've probably done 150, 200 creative projects. However great you are as a creative director at a brand, you've probably got maybe 4 companies you've worked for, 5 companies you've worked for at a push. You've probably got those stories, those kind of anecdotes, those experiences to talk from. It's not boastful in any way. I've probably been in charge of like 300 rebrands, maybe more. And so therefore, if anyone talks to me about like internal hiring challenge, I'm like, I've probably got like something I can draw on to like talk about it. So a consultancy, the reason that big businesses hire big consultants is because they have that knowledge base, that input.
Yeah.
Creativity should be no different. And so that's what being a collaborative partner means, is I think being able to bring that power.
Why is this happening a lot? So I'm seeing a lot of brilliant design and branding agencies either do 2 things. They either say, we're now a service design business as well. We do digital, blah, 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 or they're going up the strategy consultancy tree and they're becoming business transformation businesses or consultancies. Why is that happening?
Because everyone's crunching on each other, and it's happening in all kinds of markets. It's not just our market. So if you look at like VC-backed businesses, they maybe start as like a calendar app, and then they go like, actually, calendar's not enough to justify the VC money that got pumped into us, so I need to do email as well. And then suddenly, instead of them being one of 10 iPhone apps, they're going against Gmail, and it's like, why are you going to go against Gmail? And it's like, well, I've got to do super features, and so then I need a branding agency to tell me how I'm going to talk about my super features and build out my brand, but then I've got to transform that into the product experience because Google Mail is pretty bloody good, thanks very much. And so I've got to like hit some new thing there. And so therefore what happens is that we end up responding and operating in the same way as the people that are hiring us, because they're diversifying into other markets. And so they need us to diversify into other markets, because it used to be like someone would come to us and go, I need a brand, and then I'm going to go to someone else to market it, and someone else is going to do the product. And then they've got this situation where there's a division between those 3 things, different people running those piece is they're not having the connect. They're a kind of challenger, so they're going up against someone pretty big because they're desperate to grow into new verticals or new geographies or whatever that looks like. And so they need more out of their agencies to be able to hit their ambitions, because it's never been harder. Because, you know, whether you're in a B2B environment or a B2C environment, there's never been more opportunity. You know, lift your iPhone out your pocket. Let's think about it from a consumer point of view for a moment. Open Instagram, it is advertising me stuff, you know, left, right. Yeah. If you want a supplement today, where do you even start? You know what I mean? It's like, it's insane. It's just bombarding you. And so therefore, supplements, if you go back 5 years, a supplement brand didn't have to tell the full holistic lifestyle story. They didn't have to be like some kind of science content, you know, some kind of doctor who's brilliant at whatever, doing podcasts, telling story, you know. And so therefore, they need someone that's going to make all that. And so it's just pushing every brand to have to try and do more and more and more.
More
so agencies
strategic storytelling.
Exactly. So you have to go, because the CEO or whoever founded it has probably got a pretty good idea of what they're trying to sell, but they might, you know, they might just be a product person. If I use the supplement example, they could be a scientist. They probably never had to explain themselves to anyone. They're just, you know, scientific genius.
Yeah.
I've now got to make an absolutely killer Instagram 15-second that's going to grab my attention, which means I'm going to go for product A versus product B. I'm probably not going to have that skill set. And however good I am at hiring, I'm probably not going to be able to hire someone. And so I need to be able to know that that company that also did the bottle, did the logos, who's really invested themselves in what this brand is about, can also make that 15-second piece of killer content, or at least connect all those dots together. I think that's where I think the destination we're going is.
Who's we?
Both clients and agencies are going on this journey. And I think the thing's then compounded by the fact that everybody's looking for growth. And so ad agencies are like, well, that branding shtick looks pretty easy. I'll go and have a go at that. Or digital agencies are like, hang on a minute, we're getting given all these brand guidelines and then we're making websites that wouldn't necessarily be how we want them to look like. Let's go upstream and do the brand as well. Then we can make the websites we want to make. You know, there's a different reason, and it's about offense, defense, where growth comes from, geographies, million different things. But I think agencies end up operating in their clients' minds more and more, and they just don't realize that they're just responding to it.
It seems to be happening particularly in creative ad land world, right?
Yeah.
They're going, okay, we need to become much more integrated as a business. We'll do more media, right? Why hasn't ad land won more branding projects? It feels like there should be more ad agencies that are doing rebrands, considering how many people they have access to, how many brands they work with. Do you find that you're up against?
It's many years since I worked for an advertising agency, and so I can't really speak to what happens inside of an advertising agency, apart from now and again I go and sit in them because one of our clients has asked us to go and sit in it and kind of meet the ad agency and kind of connect all the dots. My very overgeneralized thing, and I'll probably get some hate mail after this, is that I think advertising agencies have struggled to get their head around the fact that the world no longer thinks in TVCs. It's not like clients are not thinking about that as the primary storytelling piece of a brand. And for whatever reason, so many ad agencies still seem fixated on trying to sell those in the biggest possible way that they can, because maybe it's where they win their awards. Maybe, I don't know. This is my outsider perspective on this. I'm probably well outside of my comfort zone and going to get a lot of shit for it. But and so for me, I think that's the challenge. And and I can only speak to the bit of the world that we operate within, though, is we have to be able to understand digital products inside out, understand what makes a great digital product, and really understand the marketing and the brand building around that product. If I'm working on like a tech brand, which I am a lot of the time, what makes that thing successful? Why do people love it? And how do we get that to a bigger audience? And telling a kooky 30-second advert about a slapstick couple buying their first house is not grounded in the digital product experience, and so therefore it doesn't serve that product in the long run. Because if you pick like one of the property apps, for example, you can put cigarette paper between the product experiences. They've all got the same features. They're all selling the same properties in a lot of cases. And so therefore, what am I actually marketing in that environment? And I think a lot of ad agencies would just go for differentiation or try and pull something like that. It just doesn't seem very product centric in its thought to me. I think you've really got to like get to the ground. Maybe it's because it doesn't make sexy adverts that win can. I don't know.
Why can't an ad agency bring in a James Greenfield of 10 years ago and go, right, do the brand strategy?
I think some of them are trying to do that, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah. I think some of them will probably be quite successful at that. But you have to think a bit more long term. You have to brands should live in 10-year cycles. If you're changing your brand every 5 minutes, what it looks like, how it feels, etc., then you're just creating like a sugar high. You're just spending media dollars, pumping it so people go like, oh yeah, that's a new thing. Like, if you look at the price comparison websites, for example, they have been on that kind of media splurge for years, and it's like Judi Dench or
Geo Compario,
some meerkats, or an opera singer. They're all addicted to those things, but they don't actually say anything about those companies or what they stand for, their difference or anything like that. And all it is it's a marketing first approach where you're just pumping. And the only way they're going to stay top of mind in people's minds is by continually pumping that media money, because you need to be there the moment that someone goes, oh, I need to redo my car insurance. Oh, meerkats, and put it in. It's a brilliant mnemonic on that front, but it's not a very good differentiating factor.
How could you brand out yourself differently? So if
you'd have to start differently. They're too far down the cul-de-sac now. I would love to have a go at one of those, but
so if Go Compare came to you and went, James, you want to stand out, we want to be the only X, Y, and Z comparison website, where do you start with that?
You'd have to go, actually, have you got a differentiating factor? And if they didn't have a differentiating factor, then I wouldn't be able to promise them that we could do it.
How do you define a differentiating factor? If
something that's like unique, compelling, distinctive, probably.
Okay.
Something that like really makes you, lazy example, Airbnb, when they first started, a challenger, but we couldn't build a brand about them being a challenger because their aspiration was much bigger than that. And so therefore, through a combination of some very talented and interesting people and some lucky moments and a lot of, effort from the founders and a lot of things, they've built a company that's 7 times, 8 times as big as many of the hotel groups, because they realized at the core of it, the idea of living like a local or belonging, or whichever of the lenses of which we look through it, is a compelling offer. And a hotel from company X, whichever hotel company we choose from, if it's in the hotel district of a city and they've got the same art on the wall in the hotel in Barcelona as they've got in Berlin, because hotel groups try and look at everything through that financial cost lens point of view, you're losing people, because people walk in and go like, this just feels like every other hotel I've ever stayed at. I'm in Switzerland, but the restaurant couldn't feel less Swiss if it tried. These are the details that make something unique, that means that you can then build a brand story around that. Whereas if you look at everything through the lens of shareholder value, which is what a lot of companies do, or through kind of innovation just skirting the edges, it's not compelling to people. People want differentiation. We're living in an experience economy.
Speaking about experience economy and differentiation, branding agencies, 5 years from now, what's going to happen?
I think one of the biggest challenges in branding is the most obvious thing to say, but is the management of change. And whatever happens with AI isn't going to sit in a room and square the difference between the head of product and the head of marketing about what's the way forward for this company. It will make you some assets. It will probably save you some money on your performance marketing generation and write you some witty headlines and stuff. But if everyone else is using exactly the same tools, then you got a bit cheaper, but it isn't the silver bullet that some people will think it is. And so I think branding 5 years from now will be less just about the creative, which I think it's already less about just the creative than it was 5 years back, and will be more and more about true consultancy and helping people unlock the value in their brand to be able to reach audiences in a world where we have to understand that we're probably past the apex of saturation in terms of the amount of stuff that people are willing to be bombarded by. So therefore we have to find clever ways to connect with people for them to really believe that, it's like, and what I mean by that is supplement brand, they're not novel. There's a lot of them out there. So if you want to launch a new supplement brand tomorrow, you've got to have an absolutely killer strategy to really make sure that people think, well, this is the one that's X times better than ABC. And within that, understand that a lot of people, groceries on demand, go back 3 or 4 years, everywhere.
Why? Why did that happen?
Because the people that invest money in these things fail to grasp that paying £6, £7, £8, £9, £10 for your grocery to be delivered is not acceptable for most people, because they underestimate the fact that people earn a lot less than them, and they fail to understand that actually if you wait an hour for your groceries versus 15 minutes, it actually makes no difference. No. And so therefore it's like some absolute basics of people, you know.
But why was there such a gold rush? Why was
because
there
they saw Uber and everything else, and they thought that they were repeating the same thing again, but without understanding that actually a taxi is a utility that at any point almost all of us need.
Yeah.
And I can still remember the first time I used an Uber in San Francisco, and I was like, okay, that is amazing. You know, a genuinely amazing thing. However quick a bag of groceries comes, you don't have that same. No one has that same effect.
No.
Actually, just makes you feel lazy and plugs into your British guilt of being a bit like, oh God, I really should have gone to the shop. This is not a good thing for me. And so I think that's where branding agencies are, to go back to answer your question, is like more and more consultation about customer centricity and what actually can meaningfully impact people in a world where almost every part of our life has been attacked by a new piece of technology.
What needs to happen, client side and agency side, for that to be the case more often?
I think one of the biggest challenges that not just brand, almost all of the creative services have got is keeping the funnel going for talented people entering the industry. I think, you know, you go back to the heyday of advertising, some of the most creative, amazing, talented people that went on to make films that won Oscars, it all came out of advertising, because advertising was the alternative world where creative people that didn't really know where they fitted in or whatever went and, you know, made some ads for Heinz, and then before you know it, they're making Gladiator or whatever, you know, and it's like, and so it had that conveyor belt, and, you know, and I've read those, you know, books that tell that story of that time, and it, you know, it sounded liberating and interesting, and people were doing brilliant stuff, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. I think a lot of those people in profile are now either starting their own businesses, becoming creators, going to tech companies, whatever. And so I think the creative industries has got a job to do to advertise itself, to go like, no, this is an interesting place. You should come and work here. It is because, you know, you are going to do some fascinating stuff and you're going to be involved in some really interesting situations. And I just don't think we tell that story very well at the moment. We just don't have a handle on that narrative. And any body or organization in our industry is so obsessed with awards. But, you know, like when COVID happened and we're all having to furlough people left, right and center, there's no one speaking for the creative industries. Yet the data's out there that you can see the creative industries in contribution to the UK economy is just consistently built for the last 20 years, to the point it's an amazing outsized impact. But we don't have a body that represents us. We don't have an ability to organise ourselves. And that's not to say, I know loads of people have tried to do it and talked about it, but I just don't think we're great at telling the story, which is ironic as anything, considering we're creative people.
Why is that the case?
Because we just struggle with anything apart from our own work.
Yeah, it's funny. We're a recruitment company in the creative services space, and we get told how well we've branded ourselves, and they're like, but every agency has the same. I don't understand. Again, agencies are notoriously bad at branding themselves and marketing themselves, which is wild. Just do it inwardly for a little moment, or take a little tiny.
But I think it's because we really do well in the rub. It's like you put someone. It's like, you know, the society is very good at organising ourselves into us and them groups. You know, and if you have an us and them situation, that is the grit in the oyster that makes it happen. You know, it's like it pushes those situations, because you know next Thursday you've got to have that thing done. Whereas no timeline, because it's just the person that works in marketing saying, we really need to update the website. Creatives who can naturally be a bit kind of arrogant and full of themselves, include myself in that group there, just to be clear, will go like, oh, it's fine, we'll just, you know, we'll do it, we'll take a couple more weeks and make it better or whatever. And also that kind of like that monument to the self, you start to like go like, well, this has got to be the best website the world has ever seen. You know, and then 18 months later, you've still not done it because no one can agree and there isn't anyone really controlling it, and you haven't got a client breathing down your neck, and so you end up just kind of stuck in inertia.
Kick down the road. You spoke about a tide rising iceberg. I can't remember what the iceberg represented now, but I love this metaphor. This could be back to AI, I think, potentially.
Yeah.
What was, because the thing I took away from that was who's in trouble. And like, because a lot of people, I agree with what you're saying. when the market has worked out AI, how to use it, and everyone else using it, the playing field just it's even, right? It's no longer a disadvantage to not have it. Everyone's got it. But there are going to be losers in this.
Yeah.
So who are they?
The invisible people at the moment. So I think it will be, if you look at that creative industries number, there's a lot of people who are probably doing a lot of day-to-day outcome work, as I would call it. So making assets for people, delivering stuff, filling in the gaps where clients don't have their own creative capabilities. And I think, maybe it's an individual in their spare room at home, used to work in an agency, got themselves a couple of clients, 3 clients, and they're just knocking these bits out. And it's a really good work-life balance for them probably, and the client, it's really useful for them, but the client looks at the residual cost of that and goes, hang on a minute, little agency X, we paid that much money to them. Someone comes in and does a, cost-benefit analysis across the whole business and goes, well, AI can deliver that now. That will be the thing. And so the analogy, as far as I see it, is there is some very visible parts of our industry, and when I say our industry, I mean all of creative services, who I think exist above a waterline in an iceberg metaphor, and that's the groups that always get themselves in the pages because they're publicly listed, or the people that always win awards, or the people with loud founders, or whatever the thing that's driving it is, and they get the briefs, and then they do the brief, and then they do the PR around it, and it gets reported in the creative press, and people aspire to work there, and they're very visible, and that doesn't matter whether we're in advertising, digital, brand, marketing, social, whatever. Those people exist. I think those people will see their businesses change because of AI, but I don't think they will change in terms of their profile. But below that waterline, there is a lot of people that work in creativity, both in the UK and globally. And I think that's the bit that will get affected. It's the copywriter who maybe used to be a journalist somewhere, and they've had a family, and so therefore they've built this new world for themselves where they copy edit a website and they write copy for sales cycles, and they write the email twice a week or whatever the email frequency is. That person's on the red list because ChatGPT does a very good job at writing a decent email for a medium-sized brand.
Yeah. So it's almost a bunch of people that would have utilized COVID as a way of going freelance. There's this kind of I know loads of people in New York that work 3 or 4 clients at a time on a day rate, and they're making really good money, and generally what they're doing is showing up to a call at 6 or 7 p.m. charging double time and going, oh yeah, the logo just needs to do this, or like the word needs to change here.
Well, I think that's still consultation. For me, it's more like it's the copywriter who the client says, I need 300 words for 2 emailers. The website needs to be updated to reflect the 3 new product lines we've got launching next week. And they're not really interacting with the client, and the guy or the woman's writing all of it in a Word document. They email it across. The client opens it and goes, I like it, but the headline on email 2 is too cheesy. Can you make it less cheesy? This work happens a lot.
Yeah.
That, you go into ChatGPT and go, I'm a brand that sells whatever, supplements. I need 3 emails this week. I want one to reflect the fact that it's Mother's Day on Sunday, and I want this and want that. It's going to do a pretty good job at that, and you're going to save the day rate that person, I don't know, is getting like £300-400 a day to do that copy editing.
Yeah. Then you've got someone just overlooking 20 of those rather than reducing.
And it'll be like, we're not there yet, but it'll be like, we made that sales film last week. It's 90 seconds long. The footage at 48 seconds is of a product we no longer sell. I need that cutting out, and I need the new product putting in at between 48 and 52 seconds, but I need it resyncing to the music, and I need it re-outputting so I can update it across all of our assets. AI can't do that today, but
it will.
That'll happen.
Okay, I want to talk about this design director, this mythical design director, that if they were entering the industry now, let's call them Wensleydale.
Interesting voice. Someone's watched too much Wallace and Gromit.
Wensleydale. Okay, they're just starting out. They're a designer. They want to become a design director, but they also want to become a CEO of their own business one day. What would you put that person through if they were beginning in 2024? So in 10, 15 years' time, they could be in a similar situation to you now. And would it look exactly the same as to what you've been through, or different?
I think not me, but what I will have observed from other people that I've either officially mentored or I've worked with in some environments is some people let their ambition get ahead of themselves and they go too early, and they never got to a high enough level where they were in rooms having conversations about how agencies are really run. They think they just see work. And so what they do is they go, well, I'm really good at design, let's say, and I've designed X number of brands, and I've worked with client X, client Y, and client Z, and I've got a great portfolio. I'm a charismatic person. I can talk about this. Let's go. But what they've not done is they've not sat and worked out how a P&L works. They've not ever had the experience where the client goes to you, actually, we didn't like it, we're not going to pay you, because they weren't exposed to those conversations because they were a creative director and that happened, and then someone from like high up would go, that's fine, rang the client, went for lunch with them, talked about it, tried and dealt with the situation. They've never been sued for a work looking too similar to them, someone else's work they've done. They've never really done new business, because what they thought new business was that you were so great that it just walked through the door. So they've never really sat down and had someone explain prospecting or networking or how these things happen, or, you know, they've not been put in that really difficult situation where you've got to talk yourself out of that. They haven't got those examples of, you know, when to be firm, when to actually just completely fold and go to the client. Great, yeah, don't worry, we've got it sorted. You know, this you need this kind of series. You know, I look at my first creative director role. I was pretty shit as a creative director, and I lost the team quite quickly. And I was too focused on the fact that the other companies I worked at have not been similar. They're very different companies, but there'd always been a collective response to the creative director, that as long as the creative director was nice, smiled, looked after people, made sure they were okay, wasn't like a creative arsehole like, you know, so many people are before, we got shit done. And in this company I went to, what I realized was that actually that wasn't enough. And I had to like really get into their motivations and really understand why they were coming to work, and why I had two people that basically couldn't stand me and thought I was like an untalented twat in the corner that they were annoyed that someone had hired. And so like, if I'd tried to, that would be my own company, and then I'd hired those people, would have failed.
No.
Would have been, would never have worked, because I wouldn't have had to like, you know, I went home from that job, I was like, what the fuck am I doing wrong? I could not get my head around it. And if I had the added pressure of also being my own boss and money and all those kind of things, terminal. And so I think you can't say when you're doing it, but the right amount of experience is the number one piece of advice I give to your mythical design or creative director.
Wensleydale. He's very appreciative of your advice.
Thanks, Wensleydale.
I think it's important, because we see the same thing. We see lots of people jumping out and starting their own thing and then going, holy shit, this is actually not the life I thought it was going to be. I thought it was lots of money. Well, I guess it can be if it's left as a consultancy.
Well, I think lots of people, it's not necessarily about lots of money. It is for some. I think for a lot of people, they've got this aspiration, which they think, I'm going to start my own business, all the bullshit's going to go away, I'm going to spend all day designing or like making films or whatever the thing that they really love that brought them into it in the first place. It's like, actually, the complete opposite's true. You're going to 3x the bullshit, however good you think you've done it, because you've got to do everything.
Yeah.
You know, the thing that you'll never get your head around is, once a team is bigger than 6 people, they go to this thing where they just put cups in a sink every night and expect the cup fairy come put them in a dishwasher. And so you find yourself as a company founder going and putting cups in a dishwasher up until a point, and then eventually you go like, we've got to hire a cleaner because this is just scuzzy and people can't be trusted to look after themselves. And it doesn't matter how many ways you communicate it or whatever, people just can't see it. And that is a thing that I think so many people going into running their own business fail to understand, which is, you know, whether you describe it as leaders eat last or whatever, you're going to end up doing the recycling, and you've got to be okay with that. You know, you are going to take things to recycling bins in a company where most people wouldn't even be able to tell you where the recycling bins are, because, and it's an analogy for running your own business, and you've got to be okay with that. If you're doing it to just do more design, just be an individual and work for yourself.
Not go and work for Koto.
No, don't. Come and work for Koto if you want. I'll put your mugs away. But don't try and start your own company and then hire loads of people and scale up and do the world's biggest projects, because it's just not the truth.
Yeah, it's good advice. I feel like I think we're allowed to say to good people, being good at your thing is enough as well. Yeah. I think there's this, I don't know if we're going to see as much of the don't want to be an ECD, CCO, VP of creative, blah, 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 as we once did.
No, I don't think so either.
And I don't know if that's because the level of management that is expected, and they're very aware of that now. I think a design director is looking up and going, I don't want to manage a team of 7 people. I like design. I like showing them how I do good design. And Woody's, who runs our design team, is finding that a lot now. We're getting really good design directors earning 200-300K a year. They have one person reporting into them, and then there's someone else that they help, sort of run the rest of the design team, but they don't do reviews. They're just like this. Was that a thing before, or is that new?
I don't know anyone that does that, so I can't really speak to it, but I think it's an absolutely idiotic way of doing it, because no one's going to respect you because you've got to own the whole thing. Like,
you think you have to be good at management as well as the design?
No, but if you're going to want to be in charge of big stuff and you need people to help you with the big stuff, you have to give those people the time. It's like you can't just delegate all the bits that you don't want to do to someone else, because it's like saying that you want to be a parent but you don't want to change nappies. Obviously some people can do that, but the kid's going to grow up and go, well, they weren't there for me for the moments when I needed it, because it was Nanny X or whoever was looking after me. And so you have to eat the whole thing. It's this obsession with only the good stuff. It's like, it doesn't exist. It doesn't happen in anything. It's like wanting to be able to go and run a sub 3-hour marathon but not being willing to do the training. It's like all the reviews and everything is the bit that makes the other bit good, because you're giving your full attention to the whole thing. It's like, the other night should have gone to bed, but instead I was doom scrolling on my phone, and this thing came up with this person talking about discipline is all about your future self. You're just giving your future self something. And so this idea of aspiring to just do one bit of something is a false thing, because ultimately you have to own the whole cycle if you want to be really successful at something.
That's interesting. And it goes against advice that we've had actually on here before, which is, delegate away, double down on the one thing you're really good at.
Delegate away, fine, definitely, but you have to ultimately own it. If Koto does something wrong, it doesn't matter who does it, at what level, whatever, I'm the extreme ownership of that. Ultimately, it's my responsibility. So if anybody's ever done anything, not that it's really happened, but if anything's ever done, I will pick the phone up and talk to whoever about that thing, even though it happened 5,000 miles away and I knew nothing about it, because I have to be responsible for the whole business. Everything that happens in that company, I have to be responsible ultimately for, because that's what I've accepted as the CEO, as that job title, and that's my responsibility I have for everyone that works for me.
Not just as the nice person that focuses on the creative fun stuff that goes, it's not creative, don't talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why you're a CEO, not an ECD.
Yeah.
Okay. We're coming to the end, but I have a traditional question that we finish on. I'm still going to ask it, because although you've spoken to Wensleydale, this is more focused around to you as a human being. But if you were greeted with James Greenfield, 21-year-old, in front of you, maybe he's entering this world, maybe he's not. I don't know. Whatever comes up for you here is more what comes up for you. But what would you say to that young man now?
Three things spring to mind. The first one is the same advice I give my 4 soon to be 5-year-old, which is stop focusing on things being fair. It's life is ultimately unfair, and therefore what you do is ultimately unfair as well. So stop worrying about company X won that project, they did a shit job of it. So unfair. How have they won that? Doesn't matter. It's bullshit. You're just distracting yourself. Second thing, a piece of advice I'd give myself is you can't be good at everything. So just stop focusing on these weaknesses, these little things that just niggle away at you.
Interesting.
That you feel there is always going to be someone better at one aspect.
Yeah.
But design and creativity is a team game, so you have to have a team mindset, and so therefore it's all about find your people, connect with those people, and then collectively together you can outplay anyone, because you've understood each other's capabilities on the field. Right. So it's the team below you have to play to your weaknesses. The person to your right hand side has to play to your weaknesses in the same way you play to their weaknesses.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you're two doubling up over each other, then you're just going to be two people clashing against each other. Yes. The number of times you have creative companies where you've got two creative directors and they work together because they saw things well, and then 10 years later, oh, you go and work there, they hate each other, they don't talk to each other, and person X, has got one floor and the other one's got the other floor, and it's like lack of complementary skills at the beginning, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the third piece of advice would be like, just stop trying to take it so fucking seriously all the time. It does like the kind of youthful ambition meant that you're just kind of limiting yourself because you're so worried about this or doing this wrong or whatever. So it's like you've got to do loads of dumb, stupid stuff. You've got to like say stupid things in meetings. You've got to be like, oh right, oh god, yeah, and like be vulnerable and understand all of that, because that's where the learning really, really comes. I have both personally and witnessed people do some absolutely toe-cringingly like awful stuff, but it's been really, really good because the pain you felt, whether it was happening to you or someone else, made you go like, oh god, that was so bad, that is never happening again. It's like the lesson has to be so hard that it has to like really smack you inside. And so therefore I think that's kind of like, that's my advice grouping.
Some of my best advice. That third one is really real. And again, I think in COVID, the class of 2019 or whatever they're called, 2020, were going to try and build a career without having to worry about any of that. And I feel like it's coming out in the wash now. We're seeing the people that maybe they're midweight creators or midweight designers or whatever, 5 years experience now they've got, I think, walking around. The first 2 or 3 were generally in their bedroom. They haven't witnessed the James going, oh God, did I just say that after the call's finished, because he's not on the call anymore. You would be next to the person in a room where that would have happened. I think that's so important. You've
also got to witness people not liking you. You can't be liked by everybody.
Yeah.
You've got to like settle and get acceptance around that. It's like there is sometimes in an environment where you go and meet someone for the first time and you go, that person doesn't like me.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that happened. That actually happened on the first call I had with you. Advertising and design are 2 different worlds, and Koto was one of the first calls I had, and I was like, this is really weird. They're not smiling at my really bad basic jokes at the beginning. That guy's quite serious. Okay, I better change my my style. But no, I didn't accept it. I didn't accept that someone couldn't like me. Maybe I should have done that before. I think that is helpful as well. Otherwise, you give it too much energy. You're worried, like you're constantly thinking about this thing, and the fact is, it doesn't matter because it's never going to change. And even if
I don't like everyone, so why should I expect everyone to like me?
Yeah, I like that. Okay, thank you so much, James. I really appreciate this.